Well, the real issue is that there was herd immunity a long time ago. And there was a natural herd immunity that was actually a very good thing that really did protect people. But now with vaccination, we've changed everything. These are the assumptions that are behind the vaccine industry. Everyone is susceptible, and everyone will be exposed to every one of those vaccine-preventable pathogens. So everyone's going to be exposed. And if you're exposed, you're going to get sick. And not only are you going to get sick, you're going to get worst-case scenario sick. You're never going to have like one little bump of chicken pox. Or you're never going to have, just like a tiny little rash from measles. You're going to die if you get those vaccine-presentable illnesses. Unless, of course, you're vaccinated. And then you're not susceptible anymore. And not only are you not going to die, you're not even going to ever get sick. Those are the premises of the entire industry. That's the way they think. That's what's been indoctrinated over and over and over again. I mean, what is this thing that we keep hearing about? That if we stop vaccinating, oh, the herd, everybody's going to die because they're going to be susceptible because they're not vaccinated. Well, herd immunity is the presence of adequate immunity within a population against a specific infection. This is what natural or real herd immunity was all about. And it really did happen. That when infants that are less than 6 months of age can be susceptible to infections that can be serious, particularly pertussis, even measles at a very young age in a vitamin A deficient population like that you see in third world countries, that they really are more susceptible to a serious illness. But if mothers had had the real infection when they were growing up at the age-appropriate time of like 9 to 10 to 11 years of age, they had the infection, and this is key, in the presence of fever. How important is fever in terms of processing pathogens and being able to maintain your long-term immunity and health? So those mothers who experience that real childhood illness pass that natural protection to their infants through both the placenta and the breast milk. That was real natural herd immunity. And that passive immunity protected infants through their highest vulnerable periods of somewhere between 1 and 6 months. Those real antibodies that had been developed against real pathogens in a real human who experienced a real infection in the presence of fever. So they activated both their Th1, their macrophages, their Th1 pathways, and their Th2 pathways for the long-term immunity. And then by 1 year of age, those infants could mount their own response. So if they were exposed to measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, any of those things, they could mount their own response, experience their infection on their own, have a fever, and be just fine and have a lifetime of immunity. That was really herd immunity. As you had like 67% of the population, about 2/3 of the population, who had really experienced the real infection, that would stop the transmission of those pathogens from one person to another, and it would protect the persons in the extremes, the very young and the very old. So herd immunity used to be a real thing. I'm wanting to make a distinction between real, natural herd immunity and medical immunity. Vaccination came along and changed everything. All these vaccines led to a loss of natural protection amongst infants. And there are lots of studies in the medical literature that talk about that they look at the antibodies in breast milk of mothers that had been vaccinated for measles versus mothers who had actually experienced the measles. And the antibodies are not the same. The mothers who had had the real infection have a higher concentration that lasted longer and had a better affinity for the virus than the antibodies that are passed through the breast milk of mothers who'd been vaccinated. The other thing is that there's this waning antibody coverage, that these vaccine-induced antibodies for measles last somewhere between 10 and 12 years. Rubella is 12 years, and all the other antibodies from all the other vaccines are much less. So when we started doing all this massive vaccination, which actually really started in the 1960s but got heavy-handed starting in 1991, we changed everything. But what does the vaccine industry say we need to have in terms of a vaccination rate to have herd immunity? 95, 97%, something like that, because it doesn't work. In 1936, Greenwood had a textbook, the textbook of epidemic and crowd disease, referred to herd immunity, one of the earliest appearances in a medical textbook. And this is where the language started to get really fuzzy, when they started talking about immune meaning vaccinated. Not immune because I'd had the real infection and I had recovered and my whole body has a lifetime of immunity, but immune started to mean vaccinated, and unimmune or not immune meant to be susceptible were the unvaccinated. That started in 1971 and has continued. It hasn't stopped. So that's where this all comes from. So if you know a little bit about the historical fact of how we got here, you'll understand how this is all planted into people's brains. And oral polio vaccines has live viruses, so I get oral polio, I can shed that virus to somebody else. So I'm not stopping the transmission of infection, I'm actually inducing the transmission. The rotavirus, the same thing. Chickenpox and the shingles vaccine can both shed viruses. And flu mist, which is one of the vaccines that they removed and now they brought it back, it spreads live viruses for up to 21 days according to the package insert. There's a big difference between natural herd immunity and medical herd immunity. With natural herd immunity, immune means recovered. Healthy people aren't harborers of infection that they can just spread to everybody.
Dr. Hooker mentioned the Harvard mumps outbreak of 2016, which was actually in a fully vaccinated college population, according to the Public Health Department in Cambridge. In recent years, we've also seen mumps outbreaks in 100% vaccinated populations like the University of Richmond, Loyola University, and Fordham University. Interestingly, in 2010, Merck was sued for selling a vaccine that actually caused mumps and measles outbreaks.